everyone, it's Lord of Atlantis with a new video on Electrobalance. So this is my deck of choice. It's my kind of like my pet deck. Um, is it tier 1? I'm not going to say it is, I'm not going to say it's not, but it's really fun to play. It has a lot of really powerful things you can do with it, and sometimes it just wins. So let's first start with how the deck works. So the overarching goal is to cast suspend spells that have no CMC, which means their CMC or converted mana cost is equal to 0. And you want to cast these without having to suspend them first. So Restore Balance is basically the card Balance. However, you have to wait 6 turns, which sucks. So we would rather just cast it right away. Ancestral Visions is power 9. It's Ancestral Recall, but you have to wait 4 turns, which is terrible, right? We don't want to wait 4 turns, we just want to draw 3 cards. Crushing Footfalls is the newest addition to the deck and from Modern Horizons, and it makes 2 4/4 green rhinos. So this is the card that really made the deck playable, because it allows the deck to not only be a grindy deck that has the combo, but also is a really fast, kill as quick as possible deck. So you may be asking yourself, oh, how do you cast these spells without waiting for them to come off suspend? So the way that we do this is using 2 cards. As Foretold, which says at the beginning of your upkeep, put a time counter on As Foretold, and once each turn you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast, with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of time counters on As Foretold. So the converted mana cost of all of our suspend spells is 0. So immediately when we cast As Foretold, because it has 0 counters on it, we can cast spells with converted mana cost 0 or less. So that is all of our suspend spells, and we don't have to wait for them to come off suspend. So we can cast As Foretold, and then immediately cast Crashing Footfalls, or immediately cast Restore Balance. So this is at sorcery speed, which is still really powerful, but Electrodominance is at instant speed. So we can pay 2 mana, and for X equals 0, we can then deal 0 damage to any target. But the most important part is you may cast a spell with converted mana costs X or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So again, we pay 2 red, X equals 0, target ourselves. When Electrodominance resolves, we then cast Crashing Footfalls and make 2 4/4 rhinos during their attack step when they're attacking us with 2 Swift Spears, right, if it's burn. Or we make it during their end step. And then the next turn we have immediately 8 power on the board, and we can attack them for 8. Or we can balance a Titan player when they're getting their cards off of Titan, right? Or off of when they have their Valakut triggers on the stack. Or even better, we can balance them before a pack trigger, and then they just lose because they don't have enough lands. The final key card in the deck is Greater Gargadon. So Greater Gargadon is another suspend card, so you pay 1 mana and suspend it for 10. You can sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land to remove a time counter from Greater Gargadon. So the ultimate combo in this deck is Restore Balance plus Greater Gargadon plus As Foretold. If you have an As Foretold on the battlefield, you have a Greater Gargadon on suspend, and you have a Restore Balance in hand, you're going to cast Restore Balance holding priority, then you're going to sacrifice all of your lands and all of your creatures, and then when Restore Balance comes off the stack, you'll have 0 lands, so your opponent will have to sack all of their lands. You'll have 0 creatures, so your opponent will have to sack all of their creatures. And you have probably very few cards in hand, so your opponent will have to discard cards. Wiping your opponent's board when you still get to keep your As Foretold on in play is pretty much always game over, because you can still play most of your spells, especially the suspend spells, with As Foretold, as well as later in the game, you can cast an opt on your opponent's turn when As Foretold is X equals 1. You can cast a Brazen Borrower if you happen to have that in hand when As Foretold is X equals 3. So you get a land basically every turn, where your opponent has to not only draw lands, but they also have to draw new spells because they've probably discarded their hand. So the other cards in this deck are, we play 8 cantrips, because we need ways to just rip through our deck and find the cards that we want. Four lightning bolts for creature removal, especially good against like prowess decks that try to kill us really quick. Two brazen borrowers. The deck used to only play one, but I just love this card so much. It gets rid of pesky planeswalkers, it gets rid of pesky artifacts that don't get sacked to balance, and it just stalls sometimes. Like maybe they have a giant scourge of the Skyclaves, or you need to bounce a Dryad of the Illusion Grove when they're about to kill you with their Valakuts. We play an Is It Charm, which is a great versatility card. You can either use like a Faithless Looting mechanic, instant speed. You can kill one of their creatures, or you can counter like a Teferi if you need to. And one of the final cards is Force Negation. So this card is very, very key in the deck. One of the great things about Force Negation that makes it a fixed version of Force of Will is that in general, combo decks can't use it to their advantage because they're going off at sorcery speed, right? So they're going off on their turn when you can't just pitch Force Negation to protect your combo, right? But for us, we can go off at instant speed. So we can use Electrodominance plus any of our suspend spells on their turn to either create 8 power or balance them. And then when they try to counter it, we can force a negation. It also gets cards out of our hand because sometimes we would rather have less cards in our hand, so they have to discard cards. The final card is Valakut Awakening. This card is still debated over whether it's better than Salundi Visions. I personally like Valakut Awakening because it's a red land and we need more red in our deck than blue because of double red for Electro Dominance. Um, However, I believe that the front side of Salundi Visions is better than the front side of Valakut Awakening. However, the backside being red just makes it so much better that I think it's worth having a very slight downside with the front side. Yeah, so now onto the sideboard. We have 4 Leyline of Sanctity because this is a cheesy combo deck that gets hurt pretty hard by hand disruption, as well as it's just great against burn. Leyline of Sanctity is amazing in the current meta. I am honestly quite surprised that not more people are playing it. Anger of the Gods for either humans or dredge or any other creature deck that we need to get rid of those pesky creatures. Then we have Blood Moon for Tron or for Titan or for any just greedy deck. Flusterstorm is a great control card because it counters, and it's pretty much the final counter if you're targeting their cards. It's also great against Storm, and it's just overall a very versatile card. We're playing 2 Spell Pierces. I used to play 3, but now we're playing 2. Again, for control, counter spells, um, any deck that's going to be playing a lot of non-creature spells. Also great against Tron to counter their maps and their Sylvan Scryings. We're playing 2 Mystical Disputes for any control deck, as well as Blue-Red Prowess. Countering their flyers is quite important in this matchup, as I'll get to later. And then 2 Soul Guide Lantern just for some graveyard hates, for Oops All Spells or Dredge. Um, yeah, okay, so let's actually go over a few of the more interesting lines and plays that you can go with this deck. Okay, so to start off, we're going to talk about turn 2 Rhinos. So making 8 power on turn 2 is very, very good. Um, it's very hard for your opponent to deal with, and a lot of times it'll just win you the game. And if it doesn't win you the game, then your opponent's going to be pretty behind because they're going to have to spend a lot of resources countering your play by either killing your rhinos or putting their own creatures in front of them, right? So they're going to have to slow down their game plan to deal with your game plan, which then allows us to take more time, cantrip more, draw more cards off of Ancestral Visions, and eventually get an As Foretold Restore Balance. Um, This can also be done at instant speed, which is really important, especially against decks like Burn and Prowess, because they're going to play out their creatures and then they're going to attack you with them, and they're like, oh, they have no blockers. But really, you have 2 4/4s just waiting for them to attack their Goblin Guides into you, which feels that's like one of my favorite plays in this deck. Another play you can do is Electro Dominance plus Restore Balance. And this is where the deck gets absolutely crazy with all the lines you can do. If you have 2 or 3 fetch lands up, right? and you have a Greater Gargadon suspend. So you fetch, holding priority with all three of your fetch lands. You cast Electrodominance. You cast Restore Balance, holding priority. You then sacrifice all your lands to Greater Gargadon. Restore Balance resolves. They have to sacrifice all their lands. Hopefully, if they sacrifice all their creatures, hopefully they have to discard cards. And then you still have however many fetch lands you had on the stack as lands. That's pretty nuts, right? Another really great line is if you have 4 mana, 2 Electrodominances, plus a Crashing Footfalls and a Restore Balance, you can go Electrodominance, it resolves, Crashing Footfalls holding priority, then you can Electrodominance again, put a Restore Balance on the stack, and then they have to sack all their creatures, lands, discard cards, whatever, and then you're left with 2 4/4s afterwards, right? So there's so many things you can do with this deck that are just shenanigans and holding priority. So if you don't like holding priority, you're not going to like this deck. One card I didn't talk about before was Finale of Promise, which lets you cast a instant or sorcery from your graveyard with X equals less. So if you do X equals 0, you can cast one of your suspend spells from the graveyard. So say you have Crashing Footfalls in the graveyard, Restore Balance in hand, and Electrodominance in graveyard as well. So the Finale for Promise X equals 2. You target Electrodominance and the Crashing Footfalls. You put Crashing Footfalls on the stack, then you put Electrodominance on the stack, then you balance, they sack everything, then you cast Crashing Footfalls and you're left with 2 4/4s. And your opponent's like, what just happened? Like, okay, so this is the current modern metagame, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk about some of the decks. Overall, big picture, non-interactive decks, very good matchup. Interactive decks, bad matchup. So let's start with number 1. Heliod Company. I would say this is a slightly bad matchup because they can combo off at instant speed and you're not beating Infinite Life unless you're scummy on MTGO. Uh, and Ranger Captain of Eos is so brutal. They have a Ranger Captain of Eos, you go Electrodominance, they sack a Ranger Captain, you can't cast your suspend spells. And you just basically wasted an Electrodominance. They can also combo off at instant speed, which is very hard to deal with the deck. Jund Death Shadow, I would say this is probably a good matchup, probably somewhere around the 65 to 70% range. While they do have big creatures like Tarmogoyf to block block your rhinos, they're really not beating a Gargadon balance, especially this deck gets a lot worse against us in post board because of Leyline of Sanctity. They're really not able to Thoughtseize us and pick apart our hand, which is great. So then we can just keep a hand that's good with balance and then just balance them and then it's game over. Blitz, I would say, is 50-50 because what they're doing is just so fast. They can easily kill you on turn 3 if you don't have any interaction. And they also are able to play counter spells out of the board. And Leyline of Sanctity really doesn't do anything against them because they're doing more damage with their creatures rather than their spells. The key here is probably killing their creatures, and I'm still working on this matchup. Amulet Titan, great matchup. Balance them into Oblivion, and they will cry. Tron is an interesting matchup, which really revolves around them not having natural Tron, as well as Wormcoil Engine. So Wormcoil Engine is usually seen as like one of the worst cards in Tron, but against us, it's very, very powerful because we can't counter it. And when we make them sacrifice their board, they still have 6 power, which is pretty scary for us. So what you really want to do here is A, counter their maps, counter their Silver and Scryings, try to delay them on Tron, and B, get a balanced Gargadon down as fast as possible before they can get a big board presence. Karn GC is also very scary because they can go get Trinisphere. Certain cards that are scary for a lot of decks, such as Ulamog, are not very scary for us. I know a lot of times I've had opponents that are easily going to win the game because I have too many lands, I don't have a Gargadon to balance them off Tron. And I say I have 3 lands, right? So they cast an Ulamog, target my 2 lands, I float 2 red mana, I let it resolve, then I Electrodominance balance them down to 1 land, and they have to sack their Ulamog that they just played. and they're left with nothing on board other than one land, right? And I'm probably going to end up drawing better, especially if I have like Ancestral Visions on suspend or if I have another land in hand. Next matchup, Eldrazi Tron. They play Chalice of the Void, so it's rough. This is probably one of our worst matchups. So you're very sad when you see this. Living End. I'm surprised to see this on the metagame, but this is a pretty good matchup. I'm 2-0 against Sodek playing this, and they just don't really beat balances, as well as you're able to play a lot of counter spells that they're not, such as Spell Pierce. So yeah, this is a pretty good matchup. Esper Control and 4-color Control. I'll group these together. Control matchups, terrible. God, I hate seeing them always. They just counter all your stuff. You need to have a Nutso's hand. The best way to beat a control player is either having turn to instant speed rhinos, and hope they don't have removal spells, or you need to suspend your Ancestral Visions, you need to suspend your Greater Gargadon, you need to have instant speed rhinos on their end step, and then have an Azertold plus rhinos or plus balance on your turn. You just need to cast as many things as possible on one turn to try to get one thing through, and just hope they don't have a counter spell. Mono Red Aggro, great matchup. You just throw down instant speed rhinos, block their creatures, attack them for 8. They're really not beating that. You bring in Leyline Postboard, blanks a lot of their spells. They're also really not beating a Gargadon balance. Jund is also a pretty good matchup, in my opinion, unless you just don't draw great. Sometimes they just have like the Ren 6s and the Lilianas of the Veil, which kind of hurts. However, especially post-board with Leyline of Sanctity, you can prevent them from picking apart your hand, and then you can just Gargadon balance them, and Jund is not beating getting 2 for 7. They're just not. Death and Taxes. So Death and Taxes is interesting because they do play Aether Vial, which gets around your balance, so that is rough. Thalia makes your spells cost more, and Archeon of Emeria makes it so you can't cast 2 spells in a turn. So overall, I would say this matchup is rough, but it is winnable because sometimes they just don't have the right spells, and if they don't have Aether Vial, they're not beating a balance plus restore plus Greater Gargadon. The Rock, same thing as Jund, but they don't play Red and 6, so it becomes a lot better. And Burn, Leyline of Sanctity is an absolute house against them. The matchup has gone slightly worse since they've been playing in Roiling Vortex, because that does just deal 5 damage to us. But if they play turn 2 Roiling Vortex and you can turn to instant speed rhinos, they will lose because of that, because they are now doing 1 damage to themselves every turn, which is going to kill you faster. Which is going to kill them faster than it's going to kill you if you have 8 power on board.
So that is my deck tech for Electrobalance. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope that you learned, and I hope that you love this deck as much as I do and give it a shot. Come check me out on twitch.tv/Como50 Lord _of Punt Mantis. That's Como50 Lord _of Puntlantis. I'm gonna end up changing it just to Lord of Puntlantis, but I wanted to make sure that everybody that knows me as Como50 sees that I'm making that change. So yeah, thanks so much and have a great day.